This is Growth Guide, a podcast exploring the depths of curiosity, questioning everything in the name of growth. I'm your host, Brian D'Alessandro. Man, it's been a minute. Over the past year, I moved down to sunny Miami, which has turned things upside down in the best of ways, exploring new communities, prehistoric flora, and some of the best fruits and veggies I've ever had. I'm all settled in and amped up to be back resuming the show. Lots of fantastic guests coming down the pike, starting today with a creative powerhouse of a guest, Justin Bolognino. JB's groundbreaking work is threaded by technology, real-time design, and evolutionary immersive experiences focused on revealing hidden human connections. Sometimes known as the Synchronicity architect, JB is founder and CEO of Meta, an immersive experience studio that specializes in the art of being there. With brand clients like Spotify, Twitter, HP, Samsung, and Google, and artistic collaborations like St. Vincent, Dubfire, Fish, to name a few, Meta creates live, multi-sensory experiences that use technology, design, and storytelling to ignite the human spirit. Perhaps my biased favorite of his work is the music JB created for the Growth Guide podcast. Yes, that awesome ear-tickling sound comes from his talented tentacles. His latest meta spinoff, Unreality, launched in early 2022. Unreality aims to be the definitive professional ecosystem for the global immersive media experience. I got a sneak peek under the hood long ago when it was in beta, and I was totally taken away with this tool as a way of really empowering artists to create these multi-sensorial experiences. Now today we get into some great topics of conversation. We touch on Ken Wilber's integral systems and why some of the best developed systems for moving through life have never quite made it to the mainstream despite being proven frameworks for personal growth and achieving goals. We cover the immersive media industry and Justin's map of 6 primary realities: sonic, in real life, consciousness, augmented reality, virtual reality, and online reality. This all leads us naturally to the ever-present creative tension that exists between the digital and analog. After meeting about 5 years ago in New York City, we later learned that our country homes were just down the road from each other. Now this is over 2.5 hours away from the city, so it was pretty coincidental or synchronistic. We both share a need and love for rolling up our sleeves and getting our hands dirty as a way of grounding from all of the digital living that we do. Let's dive in and get learning. JB, man, so glad we are finally doing this. We've been speaking about doing an episode together since, pre-pandemic. So it's been a long while. I'm really psyched to have you here.
Pre and during, when we lived all but like 2 miles, not even away from each other, and had a music studio, still couldn't pull it off.
Right? Amazing. And that's something we'll get into today, the aspect of serendipitous connections and the fact that we ended up living just 10 minutes away from each other without knowing it. Very cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me. What's going on in your world, in the metaverse and everything beyond?
Whoa, my world. I'm not sure. Well, there's a lot going on in my world that I can't talk about. I am, in fact, the founder of an immersive experience company called Meta. For 12 years, I built the Meta brand, doing every form of reality imaginable, from the first ever social AR experience in 2012 to the first ever social VR experience at Coachella in 2017. We just did the first ever XR poem. So we've always kind of been on the edge of whatever the next reality might be. And, probably easy to read between the lines here, but there is now another company that renamed themselves Meta. And so you can read all about that at my website, meta.is, but that's just about all I can say about it here in this format. Much rather talk about personal growth and all the other good stuff that you get into.
Yeah, well, just in your setup, I hear the first is used very frequently. So talk to me about that pursuit of breaking ground on something new, but also what's innately JB that strives for that.
Sure. I will say that I never seek to be the first. That's not a goal. It just so happens that in the way that we want to be telling stories, that's just how how the timeline unfolds. So for us, like doing the first AR experience wasn't about being the first. It was the best way to tell the particular story of the partner we were working with at the time, which was Beaujolais Nouveau. And every year they do a different wine label with a different artist, and we won the bid in 2012, pitching that it was their theme was 30 years of magic. And so for us, it was how can we tell that story in a wine label? And at the time, there were few things more magical than augmented reality. I mean, this is 2012, so you're talking 10 years ago. It still feels magical. And still, when you show it to most people, they're pretty blown away by even simple camera and iPhone based AR. And so, but at the time, we did an AR wine label. Then we did a live launch event where we had a technological magician, where we did a whole like live AR multi-screen scrim screen AR experience while you could use the actual phone based AR experience. But we ran into a little bit of a problem, which was that no phones could take the technology. So we launched this whole thing with Beaujolais. It was a point and shoot AR app, and like the app worked. It worked just fine if you had the most advanced phone at the time, which of course no one did. So I can't say overall that that was our best campaign, but it was the first.
Well, look, I mean, let's look at iPhone. Remember, the first iPhone came out and it worked for browsing the internet if you were on Wi-Fi with a very high-speed
Right,
connection. But when you're kicking
right.
over to, I think it was 3G at the time, it was like a crawl. So, yeah, I mean, that's always, I guess, the game of being right at the break of the wave to
I
ride
know.
it.
But look, I mean, again, it wasn't like, oh, we have to be the first at everything. It was like, how can we tell this story in a way that no one's ever seen it? That would be really compelling and super engaging and fun. And that's really the name of the company with Meta. I mean, that's what we're always looking to do, is to visualize, to manifest the unseen realm, right? Meta, the idea meta is translated as beyond. And for us early on, it was there is a realm, the meta realm, that is beyond the physical realm, that connects us all. In the meta realm, we're all the same entity. We are a singular organism. And so everything we've ever done, whether it's that project, 10 years ago, or, whatever it is that we're working on now, everything comes back to this same idea that there is this interconnected realm, and that we are trying in all these different ways to remind you that that realm exists. And it not only exists but persists. It is the fundamental realm. And I think if we all remember that we're all one thing, we're probably less inclined to hurt ourselves, or at least maybe be a little bit more kind to each other. Like if I truly believe, and I mean this as literally as possible, that I am you, then probably I wouldn't be hurting you so much.
Yeah, that would be a nice one for folks to hold on to, especially in these times.
Well, look, holding on is, I think, tricky. I forget this all the time. We just need reminders. We need to be reminded of this. And so, everything we've ever done really are seek to be reminders, that we're all a connected, singular organism.
Hmm. So let's segue this into talking a little bit about relationship with people, with experiences, and how we can create connections through these experiences.
Sure. Well, look, you have a Ken Wilber book in your background. I don't know if you're listening to this on audio, you can't see that. A Ken Wilber book with an off Klimt art on it, no less. And so, I have to immediately point to Ken Wilber. I just feel like like, where the fuck is Ken Wilber in the conversation, right?
Mm.
Like, he has over and over again refined a model. Like, I don't, I know earlier you said, philosophical, but for me, Ken Wilber's work is utility, right? It's an organizational system, it's a contextual system that allows us to organize all of the information that we have in a very clear, coherent, concise, and logical way. And he just doesn't exist as a, whether it's new agey Instagram people, or even, I listen to a lot of Sam Harris. I love Sam's podcast, and I've written to him many times. I've tweeted at him many times going, where's Ken Wilber? Right? Because like
Mm.
I almost, there's almost a part of me that feels like he's solved so much of this stuff that it almost like ruins other philosophers' business models. It's like there's so much dialectic and there's so much of this binary either or sort of thinking. And Sam, in a lot of the kind of, the prominent philosophers, neuroscientists, etc., still kind of play with these linear ideas where it's like Wilbur solved so much of this stuff. And to bring it full circle back to your question, like, I don't know how to deal with anything relationship based without first understanding evolutionary psychology, without understanding that in fact the psyche is filtered through very specific stages, and that people, generally speaking, are coming from a particular stage, right? Like the fact that it's 2023 and we're still talking about left, right, Republican, Democrat. I mean, it's we're so far beyond that.
Yeah.
Yet, we're just trapped within it. I don't know if it's because the ad model rules all, and it's a lot easier to get clicks with a divisive either or kind of headline. But I do feel like the world has a huge appetite for the system that Wilbur has developed, but I just don't see it.
Well, you've thrown a lot out there. Let me unpack a little in response. So Ken Wilber's work, I think, is has the potential for being such a complete framework that it certainly threatens the existing framework that most people are holding and most of the ego constructs that are holding. It's not in alignment with our social and systemic structures that exist, which
Mm-hmm.
means it's fighting the current in the greatest sense. And because we're living in a time where there's such an overstimulation, over consumption, and busyness that we don't have time for this type of consideration, never mind implementation. I think these things kind of fall by the wayside. And he's also, a complex conceptual writer. I mean, like I've been reading a lot of Rudolf Steiner's work as
Mm.
well, and he's another one. He's got such beautiful systems, but there's a complexity in how they're explained, and you have to really commit to getting to understand it and then embodying it. But the other part of this that I'm glad you pointed to is how much the role of the ad model plays. So
Mm.
let's zoom out of that a little bit, because
Yeah.
I think you're right that that's a big part of it. Because if we say, as you said, we are all one, there is this belief and knowing of oneness as an organism and as a spirit. So we are living in the opposition of that, right? The right, left, the good, bad, the othering that we do, this is creating this perception of separation. And we have a currency of this more than connection. And I know your work, which we'll get into, really aims to facilitate these deeper connections. But at large, most of our constructs are feeding upon a negative sense of separation and a divide. And if we look back at our ad model and how modern day marketing was created, I'm sure you know the story, but Edward Bernays, who spoke with the US government that was dealing with an increasingly democratic population, said, "Hey, I have a way to make your people think what you want, say what you want, and buy what you want, all while thinking they have made it on their own accord." They said, "Go on." And he's like, "Well, my uncle Sigmund Freud has this body of work. And so what he did was exploited the weaknesses and the predictability in the human psyche to affect behavior." And so now we're dealing with these societal structures that do not have the best interest of humanity at heart, right? Because of our systems that are financially driven at large, it's about the duty to the shareholder and not to the human and the human experience. So there's a very, very large divide between the two that I see. And the question I'm always looking at as I play in the branding and marketing space is, how can we use this vehicle to create connection? Because at its core, I do believe that it is storytelling. And that is the most innately human thing that we have.
Yep. Well, and this is exactly why I dedicated the last 12 plus years to experiences, because it is the only way. I don't know how you really tell a story through television commercial or ad buys or print media. The only way to remind people, right? I'll keep coming back to that because I think that's the best we can do, is remind them. The only way to really remind people of the meta is through experiences. That's what we've been wholly dedicated to since before experiences was the word for what we did, or immersive for that matter. But I digress.
No, I think that's exactly on topic. And I would say another thing to point out with experience that makes it so important is it gets us out of the intellectual, it gets us embodied, and it gets us sensorially engaged. And that's our medicine.
The somatic experience is absolutely essential to any sort of transformation whatsoever. And the older I get in this vehicle that I was born into, the more important that becomes. I feel like I did everything kind of in reverse. Like when I was 19 or 20, I went all the way into all caps self, right? Like all I read was Taoism and Sufism and Alan Watts and like everything I could, or the experiences I was having or trying to have were all dedicated to finding all caps unity, right? And then like in my 30s, I really got into capital S self, where it became about interconnection. And, this is where meta, grew through my 30s, and, trying to connect that all cap self through uppercase self. And now that I'm 42 and in my 40s, and, everything's starting to get a little creaky, I'm very dedicated to lowercase s self, where I feel like most people that's reverse, right? Like you start with the body, then you have a midlife crisis, and so I'm kind of going backwards. Everything is a little backwards for me, and that even includes technology and AI and everything that's happening. The faster the technology gets, the more I'm playing my piano and my acoustic drums. The more I want to literally just play with dirt in my hands. And in fact, I just sent out a mailer, like the kind of our New Year's mailer for Meta. And in it, I kind of, it was written a little bit dry, but I created Chat JB, which is I said that we developed, Chat JV. I like to call it an ontological intelligence system, OI. And so, where all you do is like send an email to my email address, and Chat JB will just respond Imagine that. And
Wow.
so I got like 7 or 8 actual ChatJB questions, of course, that I answered all of them. And so now I'm even thinking about putting it up on my website and like doing it, although it's slightly time consuming. But yeah.
Interesting. Well, there's something about, yeah, making, creating novelty of even the simplest things that sometimes are forgotten or just not played with as much.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, or Rick, finding the antithetical, right? And so coming back to this idea of being first, it was, when we did Feed powered by Twitter, which was also 2012, a lot was going on in 2012. The idea was, I'd go to South by Southwest and I would want to be in every place at the same time, right? And so the question that arose was, well, how can you be in the same place? And then the antithetical to that question was, how can we bring every place at South by Southwest into one place? So Feed was born out of that. And so Feed was, we had something like 16 different interactive installations that were all pulling real-time social media content into these various interactive installations. And I mean, I think that, the most advanced form of this at the time was like a Twitter wall, which you know was hardly even being done at that point. And so that whole thing, which was a huge success, we did it again in 2013. Samsung was a big partner, but Twitter, it was powered by Twitter. I literally flew to San Francisco and sat in Twitter's offices until they would take a meeting with me, no joke, and somehow sold it through. And but that, it all came from that antithetical idea of how can we bring everywhere here at once? And so all the art used hashtag South by Southwest. And that way in one room, you could see what was happening all over the place in real time.
So cool. And now, of course, we play with the tensegrity of that, of saying, well, how can we be present in this moment with who we're with and nothing else? And that is everything.
It's everything.
And
It's everything. And I think the faster tech goes, the more advanced it gets, the more valuable that's going to be, especially after a few years of not being allowed by the nanny state to see each other, essentially, which is a whole other thing. But I have another idea using AI. I don't want to give it away so much, but hopefully I can find some partners for it and bring it to life. But it's another kind of very antithetical idea to what's happening with AI and screens, just too many screens. And
yeah,
I'm so screened out. I don't know how everyone's not screened out.
the problem is, how do we get back in touch and become sensitized again to the fact that we are screened out? Because I think this desensitization that happens on such levels, the majority of people aren't in touch with what they're actually going through. And that's scary.
Oh, it's so funny. Okay, so little synchronicity. So after my success of 2012 and 2013 of Feed, I was already screened out at that point. And so I got called in to pitch on another like huge event for South by 2014. And, all of their expectations were the next level of screens and projection and interactive. And my pitch was called Be in Touch. And the pitch was that we would confiscate everyone's phones at the door and we would take all the interactions on social media, like hearting a post, and like I had like which was, you'd get like a bag of different items, physical items. Like one was like a heart sticker, so if you liked someone you could put a heart sticker on them. And there was the DM room where you could go into a room. At the time it was 140 characters on Twitter, but the DM room, you could go into a room for 140 seconds with somebody
So
physically. And
good.
it was
So
all
good.
these different ways of being in touch and like completely removing it. And they fucking laughed me out of the room. They were like, what are you talking
Oh
about?
my God.
We want screens and projections.
Sure. Well, that was the
So,
currency, but I mean,
yeah.
it doesn't take away from the fact
What do you
that,
mean you're going to lock people's phones up?
right.
What? How are people going to know this was the coolest? Trust me, people will know this is the coolest thing at South by.
Yep.
Word of mouth will work. No, I got laughed out of that pitch.
Oh my goodness.
And of
It's,
course, they did some half-ass screens and projections thing because no one really quite realizes how difficult it is to pull that sort of thing off and do it well and make the technology feel invisible, which is really the trick to it all.
yeah, which a lot of folks don't even try to do that. In fact, they put technology first and
Yep.
it's totally missing the point, right?
It's missing the soul, right? And I've been banging on about this for decades now. It's, clients often come to us technology first. Oh, we want to do an XR or something or other. And well, why? Because that's the cool technology. Well, no, what is the story that you're trying to tell? Like let's technologies last for us. It's always story first.
Yeah, it's becoming a bit of a lost art. It's certainly changed, right? Just with technology, but also the brevity of it and the accelerated pace of it. But the bigger tragedy is letting our tools use us and not using our tools.
Yeah. Well, my friend, now that I am unofficially a trademark attorney, or I feel like one,
Hmm.
it's funny. I have there's a quote out there. It's a big headline in an interview I did years ago, and the headline is uh, "Fighting for IP is the punk rock of our generation." And obviously, this was years before this little thing that I'm dealing with. Like, wow, that was a headline because that is really the most problematic thing over and over again. And in our industry, what do you have? You have now the Van Gogh exhibit, which has kind of sucked up, a lot of the time, energy, resources, money, funding in our industry. And why Van Gogh? Well, there's no IP ownership to deal with. You don't have to pay for beautiful custom content that's really expensive. You can just use some dead old guy's work, project it all around, and sell $45 tickets to it, apparently. Whereas if you came to us, when we were really getting into big, large scale projection stuff a decade ago, and we're like, what you should do is use Van Gogh, we would be like, we're Van Gogh. What are you talking about? Like, we're trying to be the Van Gogh. Why would we use that? Would be like going to Van Gogh and being like, who you should paint like? Rembrandt, which, by the way, everyone did anyway with Van Gogh. And he died, poor and lonely for good reason, because he didn't paint like Rembrandt and, was only himself. I just got an email with the subject line context collapse, right? And to come back to the Wilbur thing in the context, I'm not an anti-capitalist by any stretch. I do feel like capitalism has been net positive, here to now for the most part. Maybe it's 51-49 at this point. But, just this, like the idea of perverse incentives, right? It's like the healthcare system is very clearly designed to keep us sick, because how will they make money if we're healthy, right? And just how, maybe the philosophical industrial complex is a part of the same thing. It's because it's like the solutions are there. The nested contextual systems are there with something like Wilbur's work and Integral. But then, how else could we have this nonstop dialectic that makes, the substackers money?
Yeah.
It's like, we can't just solve these problems. How will we continue to, put money in our pockets? It's quite a conundrum, but, boy, even, like Daniel Pinchback, who I've known forever, and I really love the writing he's been doing lately. I feel like he's been doing his best work as of late, ironically on Substack. And I know, going back, he's a Wilber guy, and I know that so much of the fodder comes from, or at least could be nested within, Wilber's structure, but he never mentions him. He even mentions Gene Gebser, who's kind of the prototypical Wilber, and one of my favorites, The Ever-Present Origin. I think it's 1946, something like that. But that's just a book that no one even knows exists, and it's one of the most incredible books that I've ever read. Again, because they're systems for organization. They're not just ideas. It's not just positing, what could be. It's like, hey, here's a really good, efficient, and effective way to organize all this information in the world so we can keep it straight. Why aren't we using these systems like that? I'm not. Well, again, maybe I am sure because
you are clear. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it, right? I mean, it's when we're not seeing each other as one, we are looking to get more and more for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that imbalance creates a need for more transactions. Because when we're all living as equals, not to, sing kumbaya here, but when we are living as equals and we have enough, it's a much simpler and cleaner model, but that messiness is good for business.
It reminds me of, I had to leave Instagram. I think the biggest driving factor was I just got so tired of the commercialized self-help side of it. Maybe it's because I follow a lot of that stuff, but it's just like the "you are enough" advertising that is then followed by a link to a purchase. Like, which the fuck is it? Mm-hmm. Am I enough? If I was enough, I wouldn't be on Instagram. And that's also why I left, because I was like, you know what? I am enough. I don't need to constantly be reminding you how enough I am, or reminding myself, or looking for the validation of, how enough I am. That said, I couldn't be further from embodying that I am enough, but it's a work in progress.
And they could both coexist. We could feel that, and we could still get sucked into the addictive scrolling of social media. I mean, again, this goes back to hijacking the human psyche. I mean, when we're searching for that dopamine hit, we get in this cycle that is so low down in the brain that the higher, parts of the brain aren't even engaged. So they don't have the ability to step in and intervene. And it's a slippery slope. And this gets into that topic more deeply around how do we use the tools and not allow them to use us. And you brought up a little earlier with terms of ChatJB. Let's take a look at ChatGPT and what's happening there and what the future might look like.
All right, I got one for you. So, ChatGPT, when I first experienced, someone let me use it on a Zoom call, like, I don't know, a year and a half ago. And that was scary and mind blowing. But now that I've been using it, myself, I find that it's like dangerously wrong often, right? Like, just the information is wrong.
But what is the actual penalty of that in today's day and age? That's part of the bigger problem, right?
Well, I thought that, and so then I asked it a very specific question that I changed my mind on it. And so I asked the question, what is Justin Bolognino's most notable achievement? And ChatGPT said, I'm sorry, but I do not have any information about a person named Justin Bolognino or any notable achievements he may have had. It is possible that you have the wrong name, or that this person has not achieved any notable public accomplishments. Can I help with anything else? So GPT actually turns out to be more right than I gave it credit for.
No, but seriously, I mean, so all right, for anyone listening who doesn't know what GPT is, it's a large language model with artificial intelligence. And so it has access to a defined scope of information. So one thing to be clear is it's not connected to the internet, right? So if that information around Justin Bolognino wasn't plugged in, and if it
No.
wasn't relevant in the time span, it wouldn't. But this is a beta, case and a beta use of this technology. Or at least it's an early version of it. The thing to consider is what happens as that evolves, as the technology improves, and for me, right, Skylink, what happens when it plugs into the internet?
Yeah.
I mean, that for me seems like a binary
Did I
game
mention
over.
playing with dirt in my hands?
Yes.
Oh, good.
That is the medicine. And I mean, I think we spoke about this. Yeah. And actually we even crossed paths in this. I mean, once the pandemic hit, my family and we had this like innate need to just get into the earth. And it was such a primal need and biological uh, interaction that was happening. And it's one of those things, even talking about it kind of demeans it, because it's impossible to speak to what was happening there. But I know the same thing. At one point during the pandemic, I drove over just for a driveway visit because, right, interaction wasn't even happening then. And you were just, carrying branches around and like covered in dirt. And it's like,
Oh
yeah,
man, take me back to those days, buddy.
such a simple and primal thing. And I've been getting more steeped into the permaculture world. I had Murad Gamble on at one point, but also Rudolf Steiner's work in pioneering permaculture. It's just we really don't realize the complex interactions that are happening with our body and the dirt. And that's why when we say getting our hands in the dirt, it's not figurative, it's literal. And
Oh,
so
it's as
like,
literal as I could possibly use language.
and the grounding effect from walking on the dirt without shoes on, which I'm going to let that hippie flag fly. But, the science in a great
The
way has
science is
caught
there.
up.
Like, you can
Yeah.
back up the hippie with the science, just like you can back up vibes with the science.
Right.
All the way down to the quantum.
It's an exciting time in that regard where I'll say the spirit and science is really overlapping in a way that we can prove things. And yeah, it makes me think of, I think Michael Pollan has been a great player in that space, who is just seen as a great
So
intellectual.
amazing. My
And
parents still won't watch
How to
How to
Change Your
Change Your
Mind.
Mind.
Really? You should
No.
you should just slip them some mushroom chocolate. They'll probably watch it. No, I'm
Yeah.
kidding. I'm kidding.
I am going to just go ahead and say that that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, it's hard to turn off Fox News and put on Michael Pollan. But back to the AI. This quote's been going around a lot lately. It is certainly not. It didn't come from ChatJB, but that AI won't replace your job, but a human with AI will replace your job, that's always been our sentiment. That's always why we've been augmenting reality, and why we've been much more into doing kind of mixed reality XR stuff than just VR stuff. Although we've done plenty of VR stuff, it's just usually in a wider context of other realities happening around you, while you're also doing VR. And I think, back to banging on about context, we developed the map of realities, which was our approach to creating Wilber-like integral context for our industry, which we call the immersive media industry. It has 6 different primary realities, like the primary colors. And so on one side, you've got the universe, which is Sonic. Well, Sonic is at the bottom, so it's a crossover. Sonic, or music, right? The most fundamental. That's why it's down there at the bottom. Then you have IRL, in real life, physical reality. Then you have conscious reality, metaphysical reality. Then you have AR, which is on the top at the crown, which is now the imposition of digital realities onto analog physical realities. Then you have full VR, which is full digital immersion in a headset, and then you have URL, which is all of your digital coding, the internet, etc. And so the idea is that you get into trouble when you myopically focus on one reality or another. And, in this industry, the immersive media industry, and you see this all the time, even with, our good friends over at Facebook who have created the Horizons platform, they're already talking about AR, because and I'm not at all faulting Horizons. I'm just, reiterating this point that myopically focusing on one reality at the exclusion of all six realities isn't going to work. You have to understand that virtual reality won't work without the consciousness inhabiting that virtual reality. So understanding consciousness is fundamental to understanding any form of reality. Or, for that matter, music, sonic reality. There is absolutely no such thing as an immersive experience that doesn't rely on music as the fundamental tenet in music or sound design, scoring, whatever it might be. I mean, it's quite literally the most important of all the realities. Whether you're working in AR, VR, XR, it doesn't matter. Vibration is all of it. And so, point being that the interrelationship and the interdependency of the six realities is what makes for a great experience, and not one or the other.
Amen. And when we look at these and the interaction between them, it's important to also look at who is orchestrating them. I think we've, in a lot of ways, lost sight of the container and the contents and the relationship between the two. The ancient Greeks knew this well when they were performing live theater. The audience is informing the act that's unfolding. There is a live feedback loop that's taking place. And I think at its best, when these different, six areas intersect, that's what's happening. It's all alive and bouncing around. Now, when we look at some businesses and companies, they're looking purely from the standpoint of, well, we've cornered this segment, but we need to grow and grow more fast. So let's move into the next one and the next and the next. And the clarity behind why and the intention behind why isn't always there. So again, I think it's always important for me to point out the technological tools we have and them having the potential to facilitate deep human experience and human connection, or at their worst, to create a great divide and contempt for one another.
Yeah, well, we have plenty of that, sir.
Yes, which is why I think it's important to note, because we also have the opportunity to create things that use them intentionally. That's the only alternative that I see. And it's being done. You're doing it. Are there any projects you want to talk about and, specifically that play with this?
Oh, I mean, I could quite literally say that every project we've ever done has this idea somewhere in it. I can speak to, this is one of my all-time favorites. This was Flatland, that we launched at Coachella in a giant 150-foot dome. Something like 100,000 people went through it, 500 people at a clip. I directed it, wrote the script, soup to nuts, brought in St. Vincent to do the score. She was absolutely remarkable. And so, I use this as an example because it's really at the center of the Venn diagram of all the different things that we've been speaking of. It's based on an old late 1800s book called Flatland, where there was a square that lived in flatland that had no depth and no dimension to it whatsoever. So all it could see is lines, but there were triangles and circles and squares. And so it could only see lines. And of course, it was visited by a sphere. And, the square sees the sphere and learns that there is depth and dimension. And there's a whole other reality. And of course, that square goes and tells everyone that this other reality exists that has depth and dimension. And of course, they kill him, you know. So this flatland that we did really should have been called Flatland 2, because so they had point land, line land, and flatland were the three levels. And so this is time land, mind land, and void land. And so the very beginning of the film, and remember, you're watching this completely encircled, massive sound system, 500 people. So you have the live energy, you have that feeling. Depending on the time of day that you experienced it at Coachella, the feeling was very different at noon than it was at 11 p.m. And so the story starts with the flat grid, and then this is the birth of a cube. And so the grid kind of starts expanding, and then it births a cube. And so now we have Timeland, right? And so then that cube explores the realm of Timeland, and each of the different three realms had different physics, right? And so it's three different animation teams that did it, and they each had different physics to work with. So the physics of Timeland, everything was hard, right? So the cube was hard, and if it hit something, it would bounce off of it, right? And it, kind of explored all these different realms, and then it would pass through a portal and then it transmutated into a dodecahedron, which you can see here. And then the physics of that were that it could engage and interact with its environment as it kind of swirled and floated around that environment. Much more, this was a masculine, this was a feminine, much more womb-like feminine colors, feminine sort of physics as the dodecahedron kind of interacted with its environment. Then it gets into like a very fractaline sort of world. It goes through a portal, and then it becomes an anima, which is Jung's world for the kind of the animating spirit. And so now the rules of this was Voidland, and so there were no rules. And so the anima could become the environment, it could disappear, it could turn into whatever it wants, it could control the environment, it could be controlled by the environment. And so that's, now we're beyond time and space. And so the physics and rules of that were really kind of chaos, but, beautifully organized chaos. And so, I say all this as my answer to the question, how do you tell these stories? How do you make this point that we're all connected in such an impactful way? And by the way, the whole thing was branded and paid for by HP and Intel. That's how, or one of the many ways. But it's, of course, when I was pitching it to HP, I wasn't pitching, that this is a universal mind lattice that's a reminder for consciousness. I would not have won the pitch, but of course we sneak these ideas in, and they're very beautiful, and it's very compelling and very ripe for the Coachella audience. So everyone's super happy about it. At the end of the day, but I'm still sneaking Trojan horsing, this idea into almost everything. I could point to probably any of our some 90 some odd case studies on our website that this idea is somehow implicit in there.
Yeah, and in that sense, I guess you're reminding them of the connection to this work and how it does express whatever it is they're working on. I love I love that.
You can't
notion.
say it though. You can't say this is a transformative experience, because then you're DOA.
I think a large part of that is that a transformative experience doesn't live in the mind. It's not an intellectual experience. It's an embodied experience. And the second we start talking about it, dissecting it, and quantifying it, it ceases to hold its power. And that's the remembering, right? The remembering in a large sense is getting us out of that body, getting us out of the physical and into that vibrational or spiritual plane, which of course brings us back to oneness. That is the Atma.
There you go.
Yeah, man.
See, you can do corporate branded work that is based on mostly Ken Wilber's stuff.
There you have it.
Okay, so something I've always wanted to do, and I pitched this to Ken, I shit you not, in like 2004. Okay, we need a software system that can take inputs and spit out the integral framework for it. So maybe I'll use Chat GPT to build this thing.
I was just going to say that.
I have no coding chops whatsoever, but apparently this thing can code for you. And so, it's very simple. It's a form. It's like you input all the stuff going on. It analyzes the language. It analyzes all the different data that it's being given, and it kind of maps it out through the integral framework. I think that would be an incredibly effective tool to have to analyze anything. And, I pointed you to some of my writings. I mean, I've written about this a bunch, and, the idea of evolutionary algorithms, right? Like this is Tristan Harris says this is the race to the bottom of the brainstem, which is currently
which I love.
He's the best, which is how algorithms are currently used. But like, imagine algorithms that were the opposite of that pulled you up, into the prefrontal cortex. I'm sure the science says that the former is more effective, but I'd like to see the science on, it shows you this video, and instead of like the next worst thing, it shows you the next better thing. It doesn't leap you all the way up to,
Yes.
Just the pure light of consciousness, but it hints you, but it uses, in other words, the algorithm has been trained on evolutionary psychology. It's been trained on spiral dynamics. It's been trained on Gebser. It's been trained on Wilber. It's like, if we're training these systems on that stuff, then it could pull you up the evolutionary algorithm as you went along. I'd love to see that happening. I mean, it's far out of my scope. I did pitch a pretty heavy duty AI guy on that, and he ghosted me, which means that he's probably doing it.
Right.
If I've learned anything about ghosting, it's that usually if you get ghosted, they've taken your work and they're going to do it themselves. Or you're an asshole. I don't know. It's one of those.
It's one or the other. They're creating space for one reason or another.
Either I really suck, as bad as my ego says, or they've just stolen all my shit and they don't want to face the fact. So there you go. Talk about a binary.
I also wonder if it's about seeing the science behind it being better or worse, or seeing the funders of the science and what their initiative really is, right? Because when we look at offering tools that are elevating consciousness, are counterproductive to a lot of our systems in place. And that's just reality.
You said elevating consciousness, right? Like, again, it could be just who I follow on various social medias, but this idea of elevating consciousness, and I'm constantly poking people about this. It's like, where are you elevating to, right? And why it's so important to have frameworks like Wilber's is because there's a map, right? It's like, if you're at this stage of consciousness, you're elevating to this next stage. You can't skip. You have to go to the next stage. And so, like, I hear all the time this sentiment about transcending and evolving and the next stage. And then I go, okay, so what stage are you at and what's the next stage? And it's crickets.
Yeah. Well, there's also a lot of confusion.
But this information is readily available.
I think a lot of people are not ready for the information. They'd rather feel an experience. And this is like the joy of Instagram, right? You could take the photo of the event you're at and post it, and on paper, you've had the experience. You've been indoctrinated. But in reality, the same way that you can have an elevated experience that can make you feel like, wow, I've had a breakthrough, I'm now here. That's an ego construct where it's not quite true. There's a process of unfolding that happens, and it's not a matter of having one experience, but that succession of experiences that continue to unfold and build on one another. Like you said, it's moving up the system, whether you're looking at the brain, whether you're looking at the chakra system, I mean, or the body itself. It's all the same journey.
What are we gonna do, bro?
We're doing it. I think the only thing we could honestly do is deepen our connection with ourself, with the greater consciousness, the greater oneness, and everything is perfect. Because it's unfolding. I think that's the other thing. That's my sentiment around this whole period of time, because we have no doubt gone through a collective global traumatic experience, one that will continue to have repercussions for generations to come. And it's very easy to get bogged down in the negativity of it, the hopelessness or despair of it. And I see it quite differently. Change is the only thing that is going to allow us to progress and to come to new innovations and to find solutions for the challenges we're grappling with. So the reset that we've experienced is the opportunity. And if we can shift our perspective and find that optimism in our outlook and the non-attachment to how things were or how we expect them to be, either now or in the future, then we're free. And I don't know about you, but for me, freedom is the goal.
Freedom is the ability to play what you hear, in jazz terms. But the only way to get there is to practice like a motherfucker. That's it. Or you could be like that autistic kid that I just saw who's 7 years old and sounds like Red Garland with no training whatsoever. He just sat at the piano and starts ripping. I don't know if you saw the story. It's absolutely remarkable. And you gotta, the guy, he's 7. Ripping on the piano with like literally just sits at the piano and can play jazz music. Right. And so the interviewer asks him, how are you able to do this? And the little kid, all autistic with his little crooked glasses, just goes, it's a miracle. And I'm like, yeah, what other reason? How the hell else can that happen? I toil doing scales and all the stupid chords, and you got to learn everything in all 12 keys and the 2-5-1s. And like, this kid's just like, what the hell? Unbelievable. It's just absolutely incredible.
It is, and it's pure. And I think of the nature of human existence as being born into a conditional world, conditional of the time, conditional of the family environment, the cultural environment, anything that's happening around us. And being born into a world where you're turning off some of those inputs, there's something really interesting to look at there, where is there a purity of connection to something else, and maybe source, maybe creativity, I don't know, but it's a really interesting one to look at.
Yeah, or collective mind, right? Because source to me means total emptiness or total voidness. I don't know, within that there's like how to play jazz piano, right? But there is in the collective consciousness how to play jazz piano, and so he's got to be tapping into that on some level. Or there's parts to the story that we're not privy to in this CBS interview or whatever it was. The dad training the kid behind the scenes. We don't know.
But
it's too. You have to watch it. There's no. I'm sorry. I shouldn't even joke about that. That's definitely not what's going on.
And look, we could disprove that by the video of the child who draws anything they see to just such incredible accuracy. They bring him up in a helicopter and take him over like the Vatican, and he then goes and just draws all of it, and like every single pillar is the right ratio. It's the same number of windows on every, like, it's just impossible.
I have not seen that video.
Oh, I'll send it.
Don't send it to me. I don't need to see it. As far as I'm concerned, an AI did that.
No, this is like a little 8-year-old boy, and just,
of course it is, right? So what, these kids are coming out, maybe it's all the 5G in the air, dude. 5G that's one of the best conspiracy theories of all time, because it's like, 5G was supposed to like ruin everything or give us microchips or whatever 5G was supposed to do. Turns out 5G doesn't even work at all. I literally turned it off on my phone recently because I got tired of like 5 bars of 5G. I can't send a text message through. So I just turned it off.
Well,
And
its
it's like I'm
efficacy is,
back to LTE, everything's great again. It's
look, I
fine.
think, yeah, stripping down is good, but I'll tell you one thing for sure. Outside of conspiracy, I know when I am by those towers,
Yeah.
I feel something, and it's very uncomfortable for me. I
Yeah.
can't explain what any of it is, but there are so many times where I just start feeling this like buzzing anxiety in me, and I look over and there's this 5G tower in the vicinity. So I don't know. There is something to consider, obviously, with our
Oh,
technology, the effect it
absolutely.
has.
Considering it, it just doesn't work.
But sticking with technology and, somewhat of the precipice we're on, where we are in this age of transhumanism, which, arguably we've crossed over before, if not long before, but if nothing else, just by having a phone in our pocket at all times and having access to the world's information across recorded time. We're now going into a different era of that when we have technology such as Neuralink that will be embedded initially getting adoption through things like helping someone see who's never been able to see before. But again, just like with Chat GPT, I look at, okay, what's the next version, or 3 or 4 versions away, and what are the implications? Have you thought about this at all?
Yeah, I think about it all the time. There's a diagram going around right now that's like GPT-3 is like a dot and GPT-4 is a huge circle, and it's showing the difference of how much information each system has ingested. So GPT-4 is like literally infinitely more powerful than which I've already said. I'm not like, oh, GPT-3 is like magical and awesome, but also I'm more let down by it than I am excited by it. But we'll see. Yeah, I think about it all the time, and it just drives me back to the dirt. And I could be very, very, very wrong about this, but I just refuse to believe that technology will replace ontological being there. In other words, that the feeling of being at a concert with 20,000 people with actual instruments sending vibrations that humans are creating in real time through giant sound speakers can be replaced by not that. Of course, I think of raves and DJs, but even that, there's a human there. I mean, we will see what happens. I do, in my heart, believe that there will be a backlash and that we're moving towards a time of even greater craft where, instrumentalism and the ability to play instruments will be the deciding factor. Because if anyone can just, now there's you can post a video to an AI system and it will generate a soundtrack to that video, and it's incredible. And I, like, personally, as a musician, I love soundtracking visual. That's why I still believe that live ontological being there is all that's going to be left and will be the separator. And within that realm, musicianship and craft and quality have to play a predominant role. I jokingly posted, one of my last Instagram posts was, because people ask me all the time, like, oh, what are we going to do with NFTs and music? And my answer is become the best live band in the world. That's my NFT strategy. And I'm not knocking NFTs. I really truly believe that. If you're the best NFT strategy, you hear this, musicians, for musicians, is to become the best live band in the world. Because access to that feeling, access to the ontological being there cannot be replaced. It can be made much more efficient, but it can't be replaced. And if it is, then you'll find me at the farm banging away on my instruments.
Look, I agree with you wholeheartedly. The question I have is, how do we pry ourselves away from the addictiveness of technology to allow us to actually have these experiences? And a good example of this is an unadulterated example of this is looking at kids, right? We were the last generation of kids who came home, went outside, got on our bikes, and we adventured until either the sun went down or mom or dad screamed from the house that dinner was ready. And we explored. Now, the majority of kids are consumed by, digital activities, whether playing video games or looking at screens, and a lot of their time goes to that. So how do we shift it?
All right. Personal story. When we were in the pandemic and kids were forced on digital, my kids turned to Roblox. Roblox was the only form of socialization that they had. There was a group chat that got nixed because it went awry, because I don't think adults should be having, disembodied conversations on group chat. Nonetheless, what were 9 or 10-year olds at the time, the group chat, which was my suggestion, by the way, did not go well. Whoops. But so Roblox became the thing. There's a lot of like protections for kids, I guess, in Roblox. And so then now, post pandemic, the kids are in a new school. There's new friends. Now there's like sleepovers happening, and theater and all the in person things. And Roblox has all become all but forgotten. And so I'm hoping, and I'm not postulating that this is what's going to happen, but I'm hoping that that similar arc, will be true microcosmically and macrocosmically over time, where eventually you just get sick of the digital format and you need the dirt again. And I think, these things kind of happen in cycles, and it will never be one or the other. But I do think that the more advanced the tech gets, the better kissing somebody feels, if you will,
Yeah. And you say how it starts in cycles. And this makes me think again of Rudolf Steiner's work, since I've been reading it a lot, as I have a son who's 5 years old, and we're really looking at consciously parenting and schooling. And Rudolf Steiner's work looks at development of the child into adult in 3 distinct stages. So the age range, which is less important than the physical demarcations, right? 0 to 7, roughly, it's when the first falling out of teeth happens. So 0 to 7 is the first. Then the second is 7 to 13, or puberty. And then,
which also is the time length it takes for your cells to completely regenerate.
Isn't that interesting, right? And then you have the 13 to 21 into adulthood.
That's the fun one.
Yeah, well, they're all fun in different ways, right? But the 3 stages.
Oh no, you're just not there yet, buddy.
Yeah, yeah, I know,
it's
right?
It's real fun.
It's just like when people say, "Oh yeah, you're in the terrible 2s," as if it lasts for a year. That's just the beginning of life. Yeah. But anyway, karma's a bitch. But back to the 3 stages. The first stage is a physical stage.
Hey, we had a president for 4 years that was in the terrible 2s.
Well, and so this is where I'm actually getting at. So the first stage being 0 to 7, physical embodiment and development. 7 to 13 being the emotional body and emotional complexity and development. And then we're getting into the mind and the intellectual in 13 to 21. So what we have done as a culture, and we could debate whether people agree with this approach or not, but it's founded in physiology and psychology. But we are living in a day and age where we have arrested development at large for the physical embodiment and the emotional embodiment. Look at how much Americans dance, right? Look at the physicality there. Like, there's just such a disconnect and disembodiment that exists. And so the idea, just like moving up in raising our vibration or consciousness, right? Same thing. If we're building a foundation of physical embodiment, we are then equipped to develop the emotional body in a mature way. We are then taking both of those, equipped to enter into the mental body, and we have the footing and the foundation for it. And so we as a society rush into the intellectual pursuit because we're stuck in our heads largely, and we have that imbalance. So there is this importance of recognizing a time and place for different things. And when technology is moving so fast and our attention span is so short, it's easy to get sucked into the need to catch up and to keep up with the Joneses technologically. And at what cost is what I pose.
Oh, well, the cost of emotional intelligence, the cost of our physical bodies. And this is what I was saying before about going in reverse,
Yeah.
right? Through the ages. And it could be because, because I wasn't, we culturally in the 80s and 90s weren't supported to go through those stages. And again, to bring it all back to evolutionary psychology, and 3 stages can be 9 stages very easily. We have these frameworks that allow us to see how we unfold and how we evolve from stage to stage, but we're not using those frameworks. We hear about Freud still. It's like, what on earth? Why? Even Jung is highly outdated at this point, although I still love him. But we have these frameworks that use stage-based models that explain everything: politics, geopolitics, war, health. Everything can be so neatly and beautifully explained through this, spiral dynamics, for lack of a better system. And we're not using it. We're not using it again because I think it's so effective. And you can't make money with effective. And so I think removing the perverse incentives that currently exist has to be kind of fundamental to how we're going to proceed. Otherwise, we're just, we're going to continue to be incentivized to put sociopaths in place as our leaders. That's how perversely incentivized we've become.
And we again and again give away our power, our decision-making power on all types of areas. But as you're speaking to, we give away our power to what our framework is for development in our lives and achievement and our definitions of success, love, connection, what our currencies are. That's one of the things I've been playing with a lot. In any dynamic, any situation, really ask the question and observe, what is the underlying currency? And just that notion that, what is the currency of exchange, right? Is it one of victimhood? Is it one of shame? Is it one of joy and love? I mean, these currencies exist, whether we consciously imbue them or not. And that's the opportunity. And I think that's the opportunity individually and collectively, is to take them back and rewrite them in a way that facilitates connection.
Well, but we have to be aware of them first, right? So as you said, shame and guilt, I immediately thought of David R. Hawkins' map of consciousness, which beautifully, he gets a little dicey when he starts judging things using kinesiology, to fit the agenda. But I mean, his map of consciousness from shame all the way up to love is extraordinary and makes perfect sense. I could show it to my 7-year-old and she would immediately implicitly understand exactly what's being said there. But we don't even realize that these frameworks are out there. They're not binary. They're, I think there's probably 12 different stages to David R. Hawkins' map. Again, just not profitable, or maybe we're just not there yet as a species. And my own expectations are the problem. But I mean, this stuff is getting old.
Yeah,
it's out there. That system is.
There's a lot of old systems that are effective, and do they have their limitations? Yes, but the other important thing is to realize not every system works for every person, right? And I think this goes back to one of my favorite.
That's built into this system,
right? Yeah, but it brings me back to one of my favorite books of Siddhartha. Like, you can get the same lessons, the same knowledge and experience of connection and oneness through being the Brahmin or the holy person, or through being the person who is a toll taker across the bridge and is just living an observation of the flow and rise and fall of the tide of the river.
The story of enlightenment often starts with someone that has so much time on their hands that they have the luxury to go through these stages, right? Siddhartha included. I mean, it starts, he's a super rich, pimpy king or prince to start off with, and then goes through the cycles because he's kind of run out of boredom as a prince, right? And so it's like, I fear that a lot of people are stuck at lower stages of development simply because they don't have the time to evolve. They don't have the luxury specifically to evolve.
Very, very insightful there. And it makes me obviously think of the endeavor of parenting, of having kids. And you look at how many of these individuals in pursuit of enlightenment, whether it be through the church or the monastery or wherever else, that do not have children. You look at some of these great philosophers that did not have children, because having the ability
What are you trying to say, dude?
Well, having the ability to be
Don't tell my kids about this part.
No, actually, look, so I think being the Buddha on the hill is one thing, and realizing a system, and this might go back to why it's so hard for people to see them and adopt them. Being the Buddha on the hill, when you're looking at it in isolation, is one thing, and embodying it is one thing. Doing that when you are living in a world where you are not the center of your universe, and you have 24 hours of your day devoted to another individual, and likely more,
or three individuals,
and right,
and a dog,
and all of those around us, it is a very different endeavor. And what I've experienced is, it's not that you just cease doing a lot of the practices you might have done when you didn't have kids, like, having all the time for reading, meditation, martial arts, and quiet walks, or anything like that. It's that you have to apply these skills. And that's kind of the cosmic joke. Throw out everything that you did in the form you did it. But now you have to take everything you've learned and embody it in a totally different situation.
Well, I do like to think that each kid gives you 20% more efficiency. Right?
Yeah, they're
suddenly you can be 20% more efficient at whatever you did before the kid.
Look, there's definitely a reason why the Amish have so many children, right? More hands makes less work. More hands makes less work. They need someone to not drive the tractor, but they need somebody to carry the lumber and to milk the cows and whatever else.
I thought it was that sex feels great and they don't have birth control.
That plays into it, but I think there's a more functional aspect,
Oh, okay. All right.
I think there's the economy of scale, I think, is what you're getting at, right? When you have more kids there, it's lessening. But I don't know. Any way you slice it, it's two sides of the same coin of being the most challenging thing and most rewarding thing all at the same time. And there's definitely a divine design in it.
Divine design. Maybe we should just leave it there.
I love it. Well, JB, thank you so much for joining today and blowing our minds open to so many topics. Thanks for joining us this week on Growth Guide. A big thanks to our sponsors. This episode is sponsored by the Permaculture Education Institute. You may have listened to the episode I did with founder Morag Gamble. She's incredibly knowledgeable in permaculture practices and communes with nature on the deepest of levels. The conversation we had revealed how returning to a healthy relationship with nature brings us internal peace and harmony. Whether in schools, prisons, on farms, or in our backyards, the result's always the same. Morag devotes her life to restoring our soil and enriching community. Whether you're looking to level up an established career, or into community farming, or being called to this field for your next chapter, the wealth of knowledge and wisdom Morag offers is paramount. This is where the Permaculture Educators program comes in. It's a global online learning community led by Morag Gamble. The program includes dual certificates of permaculture design and permaculture teaching. If you're called to be a part of the positive change growing around the world through living simpler, speaking up, and teaching permaculture, this course is for you. for anyone looking to make permaculture their way of life and their livelihood too. For more information, visit growthguide.love/perma. This episode is sponsored by Morning Man. Live manly, own the morning. I learned about this from UFC champ Frank Shamrock. He was always having trouble getting started in the morning without like 7 or 8 cups of coffee. No exaggeration, I've seen this in person. So he created this product that's packed full of 45 superfoods and it has 95 milligrams of clean caffeine, so you get that charge from the greens and also get a hit from the caffeine without feeling all jacked up. I'm definitely caffeine sensitive and I like this product because it doesn't make me feel like I'm bouncing off the walls, but I feel sharp and energized to get shit done. Visit growthguide.love/morningman to learn more and use promo code GROWTH for 15% off. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Atmananda Yoga. You guys have got to check out their yoga alignment mat. I've been using this for a long time. As you know by now, I've studied and trained with them as a yoga teacher, and the mat is incredible to deepen your practice and to ensure a lifelong injury-free practice. Visit growthguide.love/alignment for more info or to buy. Be sure to use code GROWTH at checkout for 15% off. Make sure to visit our website, growthguide.love, where you can find freebies, exclusive content, and subscribe to the show so you'll never miss an episode. If you found value in listening, I'd really appreciate a rating on iTunes. I can't tell you just how important this is. Or spread the love. Tell your friends, your fam, heck, tell your spirit animals. And follow me on Instagram at growthguide.love. Be sure to tune in next week for our newest episode.